She cut my lock, stole my Jeep, and bragged about it online. What she didn't know? That Jeep belonged to a police task force, and they were watching. You ever wake up to a quiet morning, only to find your garage half open, your gate lock sliced clean off, and your blacked out Jeep gone? At first I thought I was getting robbed, but no glass was broken, no alarm triggered, and then I noticed the sign, a cardboard scrap flapping in the wind, duct taped to my fence like a bad joke. Your Jeep was illegally parked. HOA removed it. K. Yeah, Karen, our local self-declared sheriff without a badge. HOA vice president. Full-time nuisance. Thing is, this wasn't just a car, and it wasn't just mine. That Jeep had been parked in my driveway for a reason Karen didn't know about, a reason that had her HOA presidency dangling by a thread. See, the matte black Wrangler wasn't just some rugged weekend ride. It belonged to a police task force assigned for surveillance in our neighborhood, working with me. I was the only civilian contact. The Jeep was hot, equipped at negged and off limits. So when Karen decided to take matters into her own hands, cut the lock on my private gate, have it towed without a court order, and gloat about it online, well, she didn't just mess with me. She interfered with an ongoing federal operation. And the next time she saw that Jeep, it was parked in her driveway, with 3 unamused officers, and a sign of our own. You towed the wrong Jeep. Stick around. You're gonna love what happened next. We live in a master planned community, which is fancy realtor speak for overpriced homes with matching fences and an HOA that thinks it's Congress. My house sits at the corner lot, big yard, private gate, detached garage. And ever since I moved in, Karen's had her eye on it like a hawk spotting prey. Karen is the vice president of our HOA, but you'd think she was head of Homeland Security the way she patrols the block. Clipboard in hand, red blazer always freshly pressed, and an ironclad belief that her opinions are laws. You could sneeze too loudly on your porch and get a citation for noise pollution. I usually stayed under her radar. I kept my lawn trim, didn't throw parties, and I waved politely when our paths crossed. But that changed the day I started hosting an unmarked black Jeep in my driveway. It started innocently enough. A friend of mine, Detective Ramirez, reached out. He's part of a task force tracking a string of luxury home burglaries in gated communities like ours. Turns out they suspected someone on the inside was tipping off thieves about who was out of town and when. They needed eyes on the block, a civilian contact, someone with a high visibility lot and secure gate. I volunteered. They parked the blacked out Jeep in my driveway to make it look like an ordinary resident's car. It was a decoy, loaded with tracking gear and remote surveillance feeds. To anyone else, it just looked like someone's rugged daily driver. Except to Karen. The moment she saw it, the email started. This vehicle does not match the neighborhood aesthetic. There is no HOA record of this car being registered. Your guest vehicle violates overnight street parking bylaws. Never mind that the Jeep wasn't on the street, it was parked in my gated driveway. Or that I wasn't technically part of the HOA. My property was grandfathered out of it when the rest of the subdivision was built. But Karen doesn't believe in boundaries, legal or personal. She printed out photos of the Jeep and passed them around at the HOA board meeting. She took them from across the street like some kind of low-rent private investigator. Even added fake captions like, possible stolen vehicle. Neighbors began whispering. But Ramirez and his team told me to hold steady. The operation was working, they were closing in on a suspect, and the Jeep needed to stay put for another week. That's when the notes began appearing on my windshield. Move it or lose it. This is a final warning. We will remove this nuisance. No signature, but the font matched the flyers Karen always leaves for unauthorized garden gnomes and illegal BBQ smokers. Subtlety wasn't her thing. Then one morning I found my gate chain sliced through, bolt lock cleanly cut. That Jeep was gone, vanished. I checked my cameras. Someone had tampered with the motion sensors, sprayed something on them to dull the lens. But I caught a grainy still of Karen's unmistakable haircut peeking under a wide-brimmed sun hat as she directed a tow truck onto my private property. She took it, No court order, no warning, no authority. Just Karen, convinced she had the moral high ground, and a pair of bolt cutters. She didn't even try to hide it. That afternoon, she posted on the neighborhood forum, "Glad to report that the eyesore Jeep has been removed. HOA keeps our streets safe and clean." The comment section lit up. Some residents cheered her on, others were confused. A few, who knew me personally, messaged to ask what happened. I didn't respond, because while Karen was bragging online, she didn't know who she had just messed with. That Jeep had a transponder, a silent alarm, GPS tagging, and a team of officers watching from a safe house less than 3 blocks away. The moment the signal was lost, the task force initiated the backup plan. I gave them everything: my footage, her post, and her HOA files from the public meeting minutes I had downloaded weeks earlier. They didn't need a warrant to find the Jeep, because Karen hadn't towed it to an impound lot. She'd towed it to her own driveway. Why? Because I knew it was abandoned, she would later say. I was just holding it until the authorities came to claim it. Sure, Karen, except the authorities were already watching. And now, they were very interested in what she might have done to a federal surveillance vehicle while it was under her care. That was just the beginning. By the time I arrived at Karen's house that evening, the Jeep was already sitting awkwardly in her driveway, backed in like a trophy. And taped to its rear window was one of her signature HOA flyers. "Removed for community safety, under review." That's when I knew she wasn't just trying to enforce the rules. She wanted to make an example out of me. I knocked on her door. She didn't answer. But I saw the curtains twitch. She was watching, probably grinning. She didn't know the Jeep didn't belong to me, or maybe she didn't care. All she saw was a victory. She'd taken action when others refused to. Back home, I messaged Ramirez. He'd already received the location ping and dispatched 2 officers to quietly retrieve the Jeep. But what they found when they got there, that's where things got weird. Karen had clamped the tires. Yup, this woman had gone to the local hardware store, bought heavy-duty wheel locks, and fastened them to all 4 tires of a federally owned surveillance vehicle. One officer said she even spray-painted "illegal vehicle" across the hood with washable chalk marker. Bold, reckless, and officially interference with police property. But it got worse. Before the team could remove the Jeep, Karen ran out into the driveway waving an HOA rulebook like it was the Constitution. "I'm detaining this vehicle under community law. This is private property now until the board votes." Officer Jensen, calm as ever, simply responded, "Ma'am, you've taken possession of a vehicle under federal operation. You're interfering with a criminal investigation." She didn't flinch. "Then you should have registered the car properly. No plates, no decals. It's suspicious." Let that sink in. She was arguing with police officers about their own undercover car. She accused them of impersonating law enforcement, said they weren't wearing proper uniforms, even though they had badges, vests, and body cams rolling. I watched the footage later. It was almost comical. Ramirez had to step in and de-escalate. They didn't arrest her yet, but they took back the Jeep and left her with a formal cease and desist for property interference and trespass. That should have been the end of it, but Karen doesn't do surrender. The very next morning, my mailbox was stuffed with a cease and desist letter from the HOA. It accused me of violating community standards by hosting unlicensed law enforcement operations and endangering community peace with suspicious activity. It was signed Vice President K. Monroe, and stapled to it, a printed screenshot from my security footage, blurry, illegally obtained, of me shaking hands with Ramirez 2 weeks earlier. She'd been spying on me. Karen had gone full-blown conspiracy theorist. She started holding emergency HOA meetings, claiming I was weaponizing federal resources to avoid community rules. She accused me of being a mole, a hacker, and my favorite, an intelligence actor posing as a homeowner. Word spread fast. One neighbor, Mr. Davenport, quietly pulled me aside at the grocery store. "Hey, is it true you're working with the FBI?" I smiled. "No, I just let a friend borrow my driveway." Meanwhile, Karen doubled down. She sent out a newsletter, yes, a newsletter, to the entire HOA titled The Danger Among Us. It was full of redacted screenshots, blown-up images of the Jeep, and statements like, "We must protect our homes from those who invite surveillance into our lives." The audacity would have been hilarious if it weren't so aggressive. Then came the fines. I received not one, but three separate violations from the HOA. 1. Unauthorized gate chain replacement. 2. Excessive use of driveway by unknown vehicle. 3. Endangerment through suspicious collaboration with law enforcement. That last one, it wasn't even in the bylaws. She just made it up. The cherry on top? Karen tried to petition the city to revoke my property's grandfathered non-HOA status. It didn't work, but the fact that she tried said everything. So I documented everything. The video footage, the newsletter, the forged violations, her confrontation with the police, the tampered security cameras, even her HOA meeting minutes where she bragged about cleaning up rogue elements in the community. It was all building towards something big. Ramirez called me that week. "We're going public with the investigation soon. The press may want to talk. And your neighbor? She's about to have a very bad day." I had one final conversation with Karen. She approached me in my yard, arms folded, and said, "You think this is over? I know what you're hiding. You brought the wrong kind of attention here." I didn't respond. I just looked at her calmly and said, "You towed the wrong Jeep." She paused. For a split second, I saw something crack behind her smug smile. That's when I knew. She didn't realize just how badly she'd messed up. It was time to turn the tables. Karen had declared war, and I had let her throw every punch she could think of, until she hit herself square in the face with the law. Now it was time for some calm, calculated retaliation. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to stoop to her level. I had something far more devastating. Evidence, patience, and friends and badges. The task force was wrapping up their operation in our neighborhood. Turns out the burglary ring they were investigating had roots in a security company that serviced several of the homes here, including Karen's. But they needed one final piece of proof. Someone on the inside had been leaking resident vacation schedules. Guess where those schedules were stored? The HOA's internal drive, accessible only to board members. When that little detail reached Ramirez, he requested my full cooperation for a final sting, and I was happy to oblige. We called it Operation Mirror. While Ramirez and his team quietly investigated the HOA's email system through proper warrants, I played my role, the polite, quiet neighbor just trying to get along. Meanwhile, I requested an official review hearing of all three violations Karen had slapped me with. Not only was I not part of the HOA, but I brought documentation proving my property's exemption, dating back to the original deed. The review committee, made up of 3 board retirees and 1 local real estate agent, scheduled a meeting. Karen thought it would be a slam dunk. She didn't know that Ramirez and 2 plainclothes officers were going to be sitting in the back row, watching. The night of the meeting, I showed up with a thick manila folder, a USB stick, and a single printed photo. The folder contained every letter, notice, and newsletter Karen had issued with her signature. The USB had the surveillance footage from my driveway showing her cutting my gate lock. And the photo? It was her, grinning in her driveway, standing next to the stolen Jeep, with her finger pointing right at the camera. The meeting began as usual. Karen immediately launched into a theatrical speech. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is about maintaining the safety and aesthetic of our neighborhood. We have rules for a reason. Some people believe they're above those rules, even bringing in shady vehicles and suspicious government people." I held up a hand. "May I?" I walked to the front, calmly laid out my documents, and began. "First, I am not a member of this HOA. Here's my deed. Second, that Jeep belonged to a federal law enforcement task force conducting an operation to protect this neighborhood from an actual threat. Third, Karen not only trespassed, but she interfered with police property, and that alone could have had her arrested." Murmurs. I clicked a remote, and a small projector displayed the footage from the USB. There she was, mask on, bolt cutters in hand, leading the tow truck onto my property. Clear as daylight. I ended with the photo. Ramirez, from the back of the room, stood up and introduced himself. Detective Ramirez, Organized Property Crime Task Force. We've been working with this resident for weeks now. This vehicle was part of our ongoing surveillance. Ms. Monroe's actions not only compromise that operation, but are under active review for obstruction and illegal surveillance distribution. Silence. You could hear a leaf fall outside. Karen? She looked like someone had poured ice water down her back. All the blood drained from her face. But she tried to recover, and I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. Ramirez nodded. Great, you'll have a chance to explain that to our internal affairs team. That wasn't even the end of it. The next day, I placed a wooden sign in my driveway right where the Jeep had been. You towed the wrong Jeep. Then I parked my second vehicle next to it, another black SUV, this time fully marked. Just for decoration, of course. Neighbors stopped to laugh. Some took photos. One even offered to make t-shirts. The HOA board met again the following week, this time without Karen. She was suspended pending investigation. And me? I was asked to give a security best practices talk at the next community gathering. Oh, how the tables had turned. Karen didn't take her suspension quietly. 3 days after the hearing, she posted a 900-word rant on the community forum titled, I was set up. She blamed me, the police, the deep state HOA, and even accused Ramirez of manufacturing an operation to humiliate her. Of course, by that point, the damage was done. Her post was met with a stream of popcorn emojis and sarcastic replies. One neighbor posted a meme of Karen's face on a Grand Theft Auto cover. Another just wrote, Ma'am, that was a government Jeep. But the real hammer dropped a few days later, publicly. Ramirez called me that morning. We're going to need you home at around 10 a.m. I didn't ask why. I just made coffee, sat on the porch, and waited. At 10:07 a.m. sharp, 3 black unmarked SUVs rolled up the street and parked directly in front of Karen's house. No sirens, no drama, just silent authority. Out stepped Ramirez and 2 internal affairs officers and windbreakers, along with a tech specialist carrying a hard case. They knocked. Karen opened the door, still wearing her silk robe and sunglasses, like she was about to storm a reality show set. They handed her a folder, subpoena in bold letters on the front, and calmly walked her back inside. Turns out, while rooting through HOA records, Ramirez's team found that Karen had been illegally accessing resident gate codes and personal vacation notices. She was cross-referencing who was out of town and sending HOA wellness checks to justify entering private yards. It was all there. The tipster feeding the burglars? They weren't external. They were being helped by Karen. She wasn't stealing herself, but she was supplying intel under the guise of HOA business. The cherry on top? She got a small kickback from a security contractor, later found to be tied to the fencing company used in some of the burglaries. When she towed that Jeep, she didn't just interfere with a police operation. She exposed herself. News spread like wildfire. That afternoon, a local journalist ran a story titled, HOA Vice President Accused of Aiding Home Theft Ring, Exposed by Police Jeep Sting. My favorite part? The photo. It was the exact image I had printed at the hearing. Karen next to the Jeep, mid-smirk. That night, the neighborhood felt different, calmer, lighter. People waved more, smiled. Some even stopped by to thank me. We always knew something was off about her, one couple said. I thought she was just power-hungry, but this, man, said another neighbor. The board officially expelled Karen by unanimous vote. I received a formal apology letter, hand-delivered by the new interim HOA president. It came with a gift basket, a custom parking placard for Citizen Watch supporter, and a voucher for 6 months of lawn service as a token of gratitude. But what really stuck with me, what I'll never forget, was the final moment between Karen and me. A week after everything came out, I saw her one last time. She was standing at the end of her driveway, surrounded by moving boxes, her hair unkempt, her trademark red blazer replaced by a gray hoodie. She didn't yell. She didn't argue. She just looked at me, tired, sunken eyes, defeated. I nodded once. Wrong Jeep, Karen. She didn't say a word. She just got in her car and drove away. For good. It's funny how a single stolen Jeep can unravel an entire illusion of control. Karen built her little empire on fear, fake rules, and the assumption that no one would push back. But when she cut through my lock, she didn't just trespass on my property. She crossed into a world she didn't understand. One where power doesn't come from a clipboard, but from truth, evidence, and people watching who know exactly when to strike. After Karen moved TAFE out, the community transformed. The HOA meetings stopped feeling like court trials. People actually showed up and smiled. The interim president restructured the board and got rid of half the absurd bylaws Karen had enforced, like the one banning basketball hoops and decorative flags. My driveway, it's just a driveway again. No black Jeep, no drama. Sometimes I park my grill there, other times a few folding chairs and a cooler. Ramirez still swings by once in a while, off duty, and we laugh about how Karen nearly became a true crime podcast episode. Man, he told me one day, she was 2 bad decisions away from a felony indictment. But for me, it wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure the bullies don't win just because they yell louder. People like Karen rely on silence, on neighbors keeping their heads down, on the fear that standing up to them will cost more than it's worth. But sometimes, standing up is exactly what saves the whole block. And sometimes, justice arrives in a blacked-out Jeep with government tags and a silent camera feed. Moral of the story? Never assume the person you're trying to intimidate is powerless. They might just be the last person you should mess with. And if you're thinking about cutting someone's gate lock to prove a point, ask yourself first, is that Jeep parked there just a Jeep, or is it watching you? Comment below. What would you have done if your neighbor towed your Jeep off private property? Would you have kept your cool or brought the law down like thunder? Comment wrong Jeep Karen if you made it to the end. And hey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. More wild HOA stories are coming your way, and some of them even crazier than this one. Until next time, keep your locks tight and your neighbors in check.